Hey guys, I'm back with some more debunking, except this time we're talking about Pascal's Wager. Let's debunk. I'm just going to skip the beginning of this video, as there's really no relevant information or argument contained within this part of the...
So who was Pascal? Pascal lived during the 17th century in France. He was an agnostic. He became a Christian. He fell into the heresy of Jansenism. Later on in his life, after a spiritual experience, he started to become, by and large, a faithful Catholic. And Pascal was working on a book on Christian apologetics. That just basically means a book that defends the faith or makes a positive case for the Christian faith. Unfortunately, Pascal died before he could publish the book, so his friends collected all of his notebooks, basically put it together and published that. So you can get that book today. It's called the Pensées. It's super great if you've got ADD or something similar like me, because you're just reading these basically thick tweets, as it were, from Pascal on his different thoughts on the Christian faith. One of the things that Pascal is most famous for is his wager. So what is that? Well, Pascal basically makes this argument. Either God exists or God does not exist. We have two responses.
Two? I think you probably have more, because there are more than just one God that people believe in. So Pascal's Wager is already an incorrect standing due to the nature of people not all believing in the same God.
Right, that we can possibly have towards God. We can believe, or we can be in a state of unbelief. There are no other options here, you understand.
I don't believe in God, but I do believe in multiple gods. So what's that? Still unbelief? Now let me clear the air really quick. I don't actually believe in any gods.
There's belief and unbelief, that's it. If I don't believe, then whatever else I do is going to be unbelief. And so for this reason, Pascal says this is a forced wager. You have to make a bet, because refraining from betting is itself a bet, because it is itself unbelief. So what are you going to do? Well, Pascal wasn't a big fan of metaphysical arguments for the existence of God, such like we find in Thomas Aquinas. Why? Well, he thought most people don't understand them, and even those who do understand them, later on, when they're not thinking about them, wonder if they've made a mistake or not.
No, most people do understand the metaphysical arguments for God. I've been a part of the arguments against God. You've got your cosmological, theological, and ontological, and moral arguments for God. Now, I've done a bit of speaking on the cosmological argument, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but the theological argument is that people will take a fact or some facts about the universe and argue for the existence of God from the facts to God. The main problems I see with this argument is that they make a fatal error of saying the world is designed for us, but we have proven that quite the opposite is true, that we are designed for the world. The ontological argument takes God as its starting point and argues from there. I'm going to quote G.E. Moore here. Some tigers growl, some do not. Some tame tigers exist, some do not. He's basically stating that assuming God exists to start is a fatal flaw in the argument itself. The last one is the moral argument. I think we are all familiar with this one, which is basically God is a necessity for there to be certain moral features that people have that are a part of the universe. One of the biggest problems, as you probably all know, is what is right or wrong. Sure, you can answer this subjectively, but if there's a God, why isn't there any objective right or wrongs?
So suppose you or a friend is thinking to themselves, I've looked at the arguments for atheism, and I've looked at the arguments for Christian theism.
Why is it always Christianity? Why not Islam? Why not the flying spaghetti monster? Say there is a God, but which God is it?
And I just can't tell which one is stronger. If you're like that, or if you have a friend like that, this is where Pascal's Wager comes in handy. Because it isn't an argument for the existence of God, it's an argument for why you should believe in God if reason can't decide.
What? Is that not the same thing as an argument for God? You made no sensible statement there. It's not an argument for the existence of God. It's an argument for why you should believe in God? Just what? Even if you couldn't decide, this would still be an argument for the existence of a God.
Right? If reason can't decide, then we can decide based on other factors, such as self-interest. So, what do we get if we bet on God? What do we lose if we bet on God and he doesn't exist? Okay, well, if God exists and I bet on him, that is to say, I believe in him, then Pascal says you gain everything, right? You gain virtue and happiness in this life and eternal happiness in the next. If God exists and I don't believe in him, then I'm going to basically be living an illusion. I'm going to be living as if God doesn't exist. It's going to be very difficult for me to be able to believe in things like objective beauty and morality and things like this.
Because there is no objective beauty or morality. It's not that hard of a concept to understand.
Pascal doesn't talk about hell, but I suppose we could extrapolate and say, well, if God exists and I don't believe him, then I run the risk of being damned for all eternity. Okay. What if God doesn't exist? Well, if God doesn't exist and I bet on him, well, what do I lose? Well, you might first say, well, you lose a lot of things. I mean, you don't get to have different sexual experiences that you might want to have. You don't get to sleep in on Sunday mornings and things like that.
You lose your only chance to actually live. You wasted it worshiping and preventing yourself from doing certain things that this God supposedly doesn't want you to do, just in case he exists. Which to me is a horrible argument to waste your life on.
But it's interesting to note that different Pew Research studies have shown that religious people who attend some sort of religious service once a week, tend to be happier.
This quote, taken from psychologytoday.com, in religious countries, including the US, religious people describe themselves as happier. In relatively godless countries such as the Netherlands or Denmark, religious people are not happier. Now, let me give you some statistics here. The importance of religions based on each country. Denmark, 80% of the people have claimed that religion is unimportant. The approximate irreligion in the Netherlands is about 50%. Now, for the religious country he brought up, 65% of the people in the United States think religion is important. So, of course, religious people are going to seem happier when they are the majority in countries. You have provided a false statement here. Some of the happiest people in the world come from Finland, Norway, and Denmark, some of the most atheistic countries in the world. Now, some of the unhappiest people in the world come from Afghanistan, Yemen, and Tanzania, which are some of the most religious countries in the world. See how easy it was to get facts that immediately opposed what you said?
And we're even seeing people like Jordan Peterson, who doesn't appear to be a Christian, speaking of the benefits of belief in God. So you could say, well, even though I have to lose some of those things, in the end it ends up being a benefit anyway, because in believing in God, I'm becoming more virtuous, hopefully more charitable, more prudent, and that'll make for a more happy life.
No, don't use Jordan Peterson as an example. He calls himself a Christian based off of ethical reasons.
But if God doesn't exist, and I don't believe in him, well, I'm never going to know that anyway, because at the end of this life, I will just fall into oblivion. So Pascal says, so go ahead, believe in God. What are you waiting for?
I have to lose the fun in my life. I have to lose the truth. With the fact of not believing in God, it helps us understand and get a better grasp on the world that around us as it actually is. We just don't have the lame answer of God did it for everything we don't understand. We work for our answers. We don't just give up life choices based on no evidence, just in case there is a God.
If God exists and you bet on him, you get everything. If God does not exist and you bet on him, you lose nothing. So believe in God. Now, I know, as I said in the beginning of this film, that there are a lot of questions about this argument. So let me just address one of them. You might be thinking, this seems rather cheeky, doesn't it? I mean, you're only believing because of self-interest. Yeah, that's true, and Pascal was aware of that. But when you think about it, when the disciples preached the risen Christ, they were saying things like, come and receive eternal life. So it's not like Christianity is entirely devoid of this self-interestedness, right? We are saying to people, come and believe in God so that you will have eternal life, so that you will avoid damnation. Secondly, Pascal obviously doesn't want people who believe in God to have a superficial faith where they believe in him only because they're going to get something out of it.
That's exactly the point of Pascal's wager, to make people believe because they think they'll get something out of it. That's the whole point of the wager. You bet on him, you lose nothing and gain a lot. You don't bet on him, you lose everything. Seems like he's trying to make us believe because there's something to gain out of it.
He wants them to go on from there to something greater and deeper and more serious. But I think we can agree, or should agree as Christians, that God stoops to conquer.
Well, that's the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to let me know. Peace.